What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel.
Rob Core, let me tell you something, man. Man, fanboy, y'all know what I'm saying. God, The Walking Dead is so good. God, it's so good. Okay, so this is the prelude to the Whisper War, right? I mean, this is setting the stage. You know, after this, Volume 27 is the Whisper War. But this is so good. Now, keep in mind, in the last video, or really in the last, I guess the previous volume, in Volume 25, you know, we had talked about how Rick was basically working to form an army. And the reason why was because he had seen where the Whispers had laid their property out, you know, laid out the borders of their lands by killing some of Rick's most trusted people, by killing various people. Now, it wasn't like the Whisperers knew who the most trusted people were. They did to a degree, but it was killing individuals that were considered to be valuable or close to Rick, but also, you know, had families. They had, you know, sons and daughters and mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters, and it was basically sending a message: don't cross our lands or you'll get more of the same. Now, Rick himself didn't really know how to handle the situation. People were angry. People were upset because they lost their loved ones. And what he did was he went to Negan and he basically said, I need your help. I need you to make me an effective leader. And Negan said, well, if you're an effective leader and you're in a time of chaos, what you don't need are your people looking at you. What you do need are your people looking at somebody else. Look at something else. Have them look at something else. And so he says, distract them. Point them in the direction of the Whisperers and say, hey, look, I'm trying to get us out of this. Those are the bad guys over there. Those are the ones that you want to be angry at. And the reason why that works is because when people get angry, they get irrational. There's no such thing as a rationally angry person. People get angry and they do dumb things. It's just the nature of human beings. You know, the most rational person, when they lose their minds, when they fly off the handle, will become wildly irrational. And because of that, there was no telling what these individuals might do if they turn their anger at Rick. But if he directs them to the Whisperers and says, now I'm going to give you guys purpose, now I'm going to give you a means, then suddenly they have direction now. Because what he's doing is he's showing signs of progress. It's like when you're watching a movie, right? Whenever the next time you're watching a movie, just for the sake of it, or you're watching a TV show, watch how often they walk around. And what that does is it gives the illusion that the plot's moving forward. It's the same thing with this. If he sits them down and says, okay, we're going to train you guys how to be soldiers, we're going to teach you how to shoot, it makes it feel like they're accomplishing something. It makes it feel like there's a mission, like there's ultimately some final goal, which there is, you know. But if they were just resting on their laurels, being pissed off all the time, it would just turn to self-destruction and it would bring down everything that Rick has worked for. And so the result of this is that as all these guys are learning how to shoot, they're actually being trained by Dwight. Now keep in mind, with the character of Dwight, he was previously a subordinate of Negan. But the cool thing about this is that once Negan was essentially arrested after the war between the Saviors and Rick, this basically led to Dwight taking up the mantle that was previously occupied by Negan. It led to Dwight being the one that basically runs the show here. The funny thing about this is that Dwight is reluctant to be a leader, but it's not because he has no faith in himself, it's because he's afraid he'll be corrupted with the same kind of power that Negan had. And that's what makes Dwight a good leader. He recognizes the pitfalls. Even if he doesn't want to be a leader, he recognizes the traps he may fall into. What that means is that he can avoid those traps. Now, it doesn't mean that he'll be a perfect leader. There'll be other traps that he'll fall into, but the idea is that he won't become the same as Negan. And so it was really kind of Kirkman going both ways, saying, hey, look, you know, he may be better than Negan. He could be worse than Negan. Like, there are different things that could play out this way, but the way he's doing it is really just kind of saying he'll be a lot better than Negan in terms of how he functions as a leader. And so with this whole training regimen, they're basically just being taught to shoot zombies with the goal of shooting people. But with zombies, they're basically walking targets. It's a slow thing. So instead of just having them shoot cans off the top of a log somewhere, Dwight's having them shoot slow moving targets. And as time progresses, they'll probably work their way up to something a little more difficult or something like that, which will ultimately lead to them being able to shoot moving people. But the reason why this whole zombie thing actually works at the same time is because, remember, the Whisperers disguise themselves as zombies. You're not going to see a person dressed in Whisperer garb running at you. That's not going to happen. They just kind of move slow alongside the zombies. And because of the fact that they're waging war against the Whisperers, in truth, it doesn't matter who they kill. If they kill Whisperers, if they kill zombies, it's irrelevant. Both enemies are going to be dead. If they kill zombies, well, the world's better off for it. If they kill Whisperers, well, that's just one less enemy they have to face. Really, the advantages in Rick's team 100% of the way. Now from here, we pick up with Maggie and her group heading back to the Hilltop Colony, because keep in mind, you know, they all kind of came here for, you know, this sort of celebration, you know, for them getting together, celebrating spending time with one another, you know, having a big fair, different things like that. Just kind of like having this huge community outreach thing that was going on to remind everyone that they're all still under the same umbrella. At the same time, we also saw that there was some strife. You know, there were some issues. That Maggie was put in charge of the Hilltop Colony as more of like a governor, to have somewhat of a garrison there for the purpose of making sure that things didn't pop off. The issue was that the longer she was there as a leader, the more she ran into the same kind of problems that leaders run into. And so it got to the point where she was dealing with the same kind of issues Rick is. She was dealing with issues that Rick wasn't dealing with, and some of those issues were more extreme. And so in her mind, she's basically the leader of the Hilltop Colony. She's on par with Rick, and she is. For all intents and purposes, she's basically Rick in the Hilltop. And so from here, we switch back over. We have Kirkman kind of giving us this rundown, because remember, whenever it comes to The Walking Dead, whenever it comes to volumes, of course, volumes basically being, a single story arc collected in trade form, every volume is someone's first volume, especially now with The Walking Dead being as popular as it is. People are picking it up every day. And so because of that, the story is always written, or at least, the way that Kirkman wrote it, having experienced Marvel Zombies, different things like that, the story is written in a way to where it's basically always introducing things. It's always picking up with new things, reminding us where things stand. So of course, again, Negan's still being held prisoner. Rick doesn't really care too much for him, but also doesn't want to kill Negan because he doesn't want to fall back to the way things used to be. And so at this point, we pick up with Gabriel. Now, of course, Gabriel, being the religious man of the Alexandria safe zone, basically says, hey, look, I'm a man of God. I'm a man of faith. I'm here to save the souls of the people that are fighting, but I also want to be a fighter. I don't want to just sit on the sidelines reading people their last rites as they die on the field of battle. I want to actually contribute to the conflict. I want to be there, be part of this whole thing. And so because of that, Rick's like, yeah, man, if that's what you want to do, then you can do that. Come on board. At the same time, we also have him going to Michonne. Now, with regards to the character of Michonne, keep in mind, we had talked about before how she was basically just running away. That's all she ever did was run away, because remember, with her whole story, when the zombie infection first broke out, her kids were on the other side of town. Well, hell, for all the good it was worth trying to get back there, they might as well have been on the moon. And so because of that, she felt like she abandoned her family in their time of need. Now, she didn't literally abandon them. It was just the idea that she had allowed her career to come first. But when her family needed them most, by the time she got back to them, they were gone. And so her, forming close attachments with people was never really part of the case. She always kept herself guarded. With Ezekiel, she had the potential to find love, but she ran away because she was afraid that she would do something wrong, that everything would go south. It's this whole disconnect that she was dealing with. The problem is that by the time it came around for her to make amends, by the time the point came with her conversation with Rick, when he basically said, get your shit together, get with Ezekiel, you're in love, stop being an idiot, Ezekiel had been killed. And so there was no going back for her. She had basically lost what she perceived to be her chance at happiness. And so because of that, Rick says, look, you're a very capable woman. You're a strong, confident, smart woman, and you're one of the most capable people that he's fought alongside, because remember, she's been with him really since around or before the events of the prison. And so she's been with him for a long time. And because of that, he says, we need you. More so than that, we need you at the kingdom, because Ezekiel's gone. Those people are lost. They have no leader. They have no direction, entirely in pandemonium. And all it's going to take is for someone with the wrong motivations to step up and become the next Negan at the kingdom, and suddenly we're at war with the saviors again. And so because of that, he says, I want you to go to the kingdom, and I want you to be their leader over there. I want you to be there so that we have basically one member in my group in each area, this whole safe zone. And so because of that, she basically says, okay, she's like, look, I'll go ahead and take off there, because she knows it's the right thing to do. And so finally, what we end up doing is we pick up with Eugene. Now keep in mind, the cool thing about Eugene is, again, he had basically always been a coward. He had always been the guy, he was the last one in, first one out, the last guy that you want to be associated with. But despite his laziness, despite his cowardice, he ended up developing the balls he needed to become one of the most important members of Rick's group. He was the guy that built ammo. He's the tech guy. He's an intrinsic part. If they lost Eugene, they would be set back God only knows how far. And so because of that, he's basically been working on a radio. And during his attempts to try to communicate, during his attempts to try to reach out, he finally gets a hold of someone. Someone out there in the world is able to communicate with him. Now, this is not a long-range radio, or at least it doesn't seem that way. So this is a short-range radio. And so it seems like they're relatively close. Not super close. I doubt they're across the street, but they're relatively close. They might be, 50, 60 miles away or something like that, which, in a world without cars might as well be, on the other side of the planet. But the fact remains here that during the conversations that Eugene's having with this person, there's trust. There's an issue of trust going back and forth between the two of them, because for them, the idea here is they don't know each other. Eugene's like, I don't know who you are. I could give you all our information. You roll in here 1,000 strong, crush all of us, take everything we have, and we're all dead. At the same time, it's this other person's concern. Now, of course, Eugene says, look, we've got about 50 people or something like that in this one area, but he doesn't tell them immediately about the hilltop. He doesn't tell them immediately about the kingdom, which has the largest number of people. He doesn't tell them immediately about all these different things. All he says is, look, we've made some decisions that we wish we hadn't made. We've done some things that we wish we hadn't done, but in the end, it made us better off. We're in a much better place than we used to be. And so again, picking up with Rick, we basically join him with the arrival of a kid named Brandon. Now keep in mind, Brandon was one of the individuals whose parents were killed. Remember, back when Gregory was still alive and he was making moves to cast out Maggie, he had gone around to a handful of people. Well, the issue is that some of these people who had stood against Maggie were basically, they were imprisoned or they were punished. They weren't outright executed, but they were some of the individuals who were killed by Alpha when she showed up from the Whisperers camp, invaded Rick's camp, snuck in, and then chopped off the heads of a bunch of people for the purpose of showing Rick where the borderline was at, where the end of his property begins and where the start of the Whisperer border begins. Now, of course, Brandon's lashing out. I mean, you would expect him to, right? I mean, he's a teenage kid, so he's already going through the idea of teenage life, young adult life, just, challenging authority, so on and so forth. But at the same time, he hates Rick because he's like, you're the reason my parents were killed. Because of you, because you went into the Whisperer camp, because you went and did all these things, my parents were killed, because of your actions. And so, of course, Brandon immediately accosts him, but in the midst of all this, we of course have Michonne running up and Michonne's able to pull him off. But the cool thing about this is that Rick could easily retaliate by saying, well, you're out of here. Take him 3 trees over, put him on his knees and shoot him in the back of the head. It would be easy for him to do that, but they're getting ready to go to war. You don't execute your people in a time of war. Russia did that during World War II and they almost lost. They were crushed by Germany, especially when it came to the Battle of Stalingrad. So you don't shoot your own guys when you're in the middle of a conflict. You take what you have and you work with it. And so because of this, with all these people, with Maggie's group basically taking off, with all of them heading back to the Hilltop Colony, it creates a very confusing situation because you basically have a mass exodus of a couple dozen people. And Brandon uses this to his advantage. And what he does is he travels to the prison where Negan's at and says, I'm here to get you out. I'm here to break you free. I'm here to get you out of this prison cell and get you on the road. And the reason why he says that is because he says, you're an enemy of Rick. I'm an enemy of Rick. What I say we do is we go and we find the Whisperers. We tell the Whisperers everything they want to know, and we ask that they help us kill Rick and his group. And so because of this, Negan says, okay, look, I'm not saying I'm going to work with you. I'm not saying I'm going to be your friend. I'm just saying, let me think about it. And this is kind of cool here because Kirkman kind of toys, right? He's like, well, maybe Negan's an ally of Rick. Maybe Negan likes Rick. We know he respects him. So it's like, well, maybe Negan won't escape. Maybe Negan will stay. Maybe Negan will escape. We don't really know off the top of our heads. Instead, what we do is we pick up with Rick Grimes' continued campaign to turn the heads of all of his people towards the Whisperers when he starts putting up signs that say, silence the Whisperers. Now, the reason why this is so significant is because of the fact that it's actually going to sow chaos within the community. It's going to cause a lot of problems. However, in the middle of all this, while these signs are being put up and so on, we end up having one of the members of the community come racing up to Rick Grimes and say, look, Negan's gone. We don't know where he is. Negan just took off. The keys to the cell are gone. And so once Rick gets down there, sure enough, Negan alongside Brandon have vanished and we have no idea where in the heck they went to. Now from here, we transition over to Maggie and their group making their move, as they're going from one place to the next. And this is when we learn where Negan went to, right? Negan and Brandon are basically following along inside this caravan and the hopes just kind of blending in. Of course, Negan gets his leather jacket back. Man, dude, if I could, I would love to have the leather jacket of Negan. He gets his knife back, just the things that we're used to seeing him wear, when it comes to him. But the funny thing about this too is he also toys with the idea of turning against Brandon. He's like, look, man, like you said you would help me get out if I helped you get into the Whisperers. Why would I help you now? Like, what motivation do I have? What reason do I have? And he says, well, hey man, you hate Rick as much as I do. And so Negan's like, okay, well, I guess that's motivation enough. And Brandon basically leads him towards the Whisperer camp. And so, at this point, we still have Eugene talking to this, voice on the other side of the radio. And the two of them kind of drop clues occasionally, but not enough for either one to really know where the other's at. But the cool thing is that Kirkman's basically saying this barrier of trust is being built. Of course, the rule was that neither of them would let anybody else talk to the other. And so, this person on the radio would be the only person to talk to Eugene. Eugene would be the only person to talk to this person on the radio. That would be it. Nobody else would get involved and they wouldn't tell anybody else what's going on. Now, this is dangerous. This is super, super dangerous. And the reason why is because it'd be very easy for Eugene to fall prey to whoever it is on this radio, especially because it's a woman. But the reason why I say this is because he's still a grieving man. Rosita was pregnant when she was killed. It wasn't his child, but it was a child he intended to raise nonetheless. And so because of that, he looked at the situation and said he's crushed in his experience. Not only that, he's basically reaching out to the first voice he's heard that's not part of their group. There's other life, other people out there, other groups, other encampments, against other societies, but he doesn't know anything about them. And so by basically saying, I'm not going to tell Rick, I'm not going to tell anybody here what I'm hearing, if plans were made, if it was like, hey, let's get together, or let's talk or something like that, let's meet up somewhere, just you and me, well then suddenly Eugene goes wandering off into a town and he's ambushed by 500 people, and they force Eugene to lead them back to Alexandria, and everybody gets killed. It's Kirkman kind of leaving it to us, and that's the cool thing, is because as this story progresses, as The Walking Dead went from, volume 1 all the way up to where it is right now, we saw the characters grow, we saw the characters change, but Kirkman would always inject these situations where it was left to us to decide whether or not some disembodied voice on a radio somewhere is a good person or a bad person, and how we view them as a direct reflection of really us as we go through this story. But the issue is that in the middle of this conversation, for Eugene, there's suddenly a gunshot in the background. Of course, he races out there. We have, Jesus, and we have Rick arriving on the scene, and come to find out, somebody had basically gotten carried away with one of the signs, and it said, this guy that's in this town, I've never seen him before. He's a whisperer. The dude basically lost his mind and shot him. And so because of that, he was basically caught up in all the propaganda. He was immersed in all the propaganda and everything that was going on. Now, jumping back to Negan and Brandon, this is where things get really, really wild. This is where the story actually gets incredibly cool. And the reason why I say that is because once Brandon takes Negan to the borders of the Whisperers, he says, okay, are you ready for this? Are we ready to go? And Negan's like, yeah, man, just keep leading the way. But the more he talks, the more Brandon talks, the more Brandon makes himself sound like a buffoon, because he's like, yeah, man, my parents are dead, so on and so forth, and we as the reader would look at that and say, yeah, like that's a crushing experience, when your parents are killed like that. But for the character of Negan, he's like, man, whatever, kid, toughen up, and so in the end, he says, look, this was your whole plan. Your whole plan was to get us here, so that we could go talk to the Whisperers. The problem with that is that it's not my plan. And so what he does is he stabs Brandon and kills him, making his way over to the Whisperer compound. And so it's so cool, because this is like classic Negan, right? This is the Negan that we all know and love. We all love seeing this version of his character when he's just like dark, cruel, and sadistic, and so on and so forth. The funny thing about this, though, and this is something else to keep in mind, Negan's not unintelligent. There's a reason why Negan stabbed him. Rick told Negan everything he needed to know about the Whisperers, what they do, how they function, what their hierarchy's like, how they kill people. They kill people by roaming around and stabbing them. Negan allowing Brandon to lead him to the border of the Whisperers meant that when Negan stabbed him, once you have Michonne pass by, they basically look and they say, yep, man, Brandon died. He decided he wanted to roam off and he wanted to go find the Whisperers. Well, he found the Whisperers, he crossed their borders, and they stabbed him and killed him. They have no idea that Negan was the one that did it. They have no idea that Negan's heading back that direction. That's how smart Negan is. Now from here, we pick up with him actually roaming full on in the borders of the Whisperers, where he almost immediately picks up on the fact that they're there, and he tells them, come out, stop hiding, come out of the bushes, come show me where you're at. And this is so cool because it's Negan meeting the Whisperers for the first time, and it's so awesome because it's like this, like the one thing we've been looking forward to, right? Like, what would happen if like Negan met the Whisperers? Like, how would that situation unfold? Well, this is what we get to see. Negan is fearless. There's not 1 ounce of fear in his body, not one shaking. In fact, he's making light of the whole things. Like one of the questions he asks is like, if you guys are walking around and you guys look like zombies, how do you keep from stabbing one another? Don't tell me it hasn't happened before. It's just funny questions like that. Just like things that we would ask as the reader going through the story. It's hilarious to see all this unfold. And he's like, okay, well, here's a question, like what's under all that? I mean, are you guys just like hideous, grotesque monsters? Or are you just like normal looking human beings? What would drive you to this? And so it's so cool to see it all unfold. But in the midst of all this bantering, in the midst of all this back and forth, we suddenly have the arrival of Beta. Now keep in mind, when it comes to the Whisperers, their hierarchy follows exactly as it would seem. You have Alpha at the very top, you have Beta who's directly under her, and then we don't really know much about what else. It seems like those are the only two. They're just like the top people, and then everybody else is subservient under them, which is actually a pretty good way to keep it. The less people you have at the top, really the more control you have, if that makes any sense. It's like the old Star Wars concept of the rule of 2. But the fact remains here that in the face of Beta, this monumental, this huge guy wielding 2 knives, Negan doesn't care. He does not care who this guy is. He even goes as far as to call him Frowny McTwo-Knives. I mean, it's hilarious. But the other cool thing here is that Negan's like, dude, yeah, you're a big guy and you might be able to take me out, but I guarantee almost none of these guys around here knows how to fight an actual fight. There are people who were scared and they undertook your mantle because they believe that you could keep them safe. But if it comes down to it, I can kill every last one of these guys. You might kill me, but I'll take your number out in the process. And that's cool because it's Negan like, I don't care who you are. Like you will die regardless. Like there's no, I don't have any concern about who you are or what you're about. You know, all I know is that if you get in my way, I'm going to kill you. But what he says is, look, I'm not here to get in your way. I don't want you to get in my way. I want to join you guys. Like, I want to know what the Whisperers are about. I want to become a part of your camp. I want to become a part of everything that you guys have going on. And so, picking up with the arrival of him at the Whisper camp himself, he comes into contact with Alpha, meets her for the very first time, and he's just like, I am in love. And here's the thing, I don't know about you guys, and I can't help but do this now. I don't know about you guys, but I can't help but read Negan's lines in the voice of Jeffrey Dean Morgan. It's like, you must be Alpha, and I am in love. I can't help but read it that way. Like, it sticks with me because Jeffrey Dean Morgan is such a great Negan. But with regards to this whole encounter, it's actually really cool, you know, because while he's talking to Alpha, he keeps making passes, you know, keeps making jokes about how she turns him on, about how different parts of his body are reacting to her. It's Negan being Negan, which is actually pretty funny. And he gets to the point where she's like, will you please stop making comments like that? Will you please stop making passes at me? You know, but it's also kind of cool here because Negan almost immediately sees through her ruse. When she freaks out, when she loses it and punches him, Beta comes running up and he's like, did he touch you? Did he hit you? You know, that kind of thing. Like, he's immediately at her side. Of course, she tells him to stand down, but in response to this, Negan starts making fun of him, starts giving this guy a hard time. Beta freaks out, chokes him up against the wall. And so Negan, of course, is like, hey man, look, you know, the whole reason why I'm here, the whole reason why I'm in this place is because I'm basically scared. I'm terrified out of my wits. I've been roaming alone for a while. You know, I just want to make sure that I can be kept safe. You know, I just want to make sure that I can join a group of people who won't necessarily turn against me, who won't lock me in a cell somewhere. And so because of that, what he's told by Alpha is that if you act correctly, if you behave yourself, if you do what you're supposed to do, then you will find yourself as a member of our group. You'll be able to become a Whisperer. And so because of this, Beta, who basically says, look, I do not approve of the idea that Negan is going to be part of the Whisperers. I don't like this. You know, Alpha steps up and says, are you questioning my authority? You know, and then this is kind of the cool thing is because Beta reacts with the idea that Alpha will kill him for that, which she would. She would kill him for questioning her authority. But she also says, you've been with me the longest. You've been with me before anybody else. It's always been the two of us. Are you really going to question me? You know, and he says, no, I'm sorry. I did not mean to question you. You are Alpha. Now, this is the cool thing here. This is what Kirkman's telling us. It's not like Alpha is, you know, some military woman with insane martial arts skills and all kinds of training. It's actually just legitimate loyalty. Not only that, on behalf of Beta, it's love. Love is the reason why he acts the way he does. You know, and of course, Negan basically approaches Alpha and says, look, you know, I recognize your strength. I bend to your will. Do you accept me? And she says, yes. You know, and then one of the first questions he asks is, do I get a skin suit? Do I get to have a skin suit? And she says, no, you have to earn that. You have to show that you can be a contributing member to the Whisperers. If you can show that, then you will get a skin suit. You will become part of our group. And so what happens is he basically undergoes these trials. He becomes a contributing member of society. And it's also Kirkman showing us how the Whisperers function, right? I mean, they're not like savages. Well, I mean, they are to a degree, but they're not totally screwed up. Instead, you know, they tend to their land, they tend to their horses, they sleep outside, they hunt, they follow what we would consider to be, you know, a more archaic form of living, but it is a natural form of living nonetheless, at least in terms of this capacity. The problem is, you know, while he's in the middle of working alongside these folks, he's suddenly attacked by a couple zombies. He's given his knife back by Alpha and says, if you can kill them, then you will prove your worth for having a skin suit and you will officially become one of us. Not only does he kill him, he comes walking back. He comes walking back with a zombie over each arm and he's like, soak it in, guys, soak it in. That's why I love Negan so much. He's got so much character. Like he's such an awesome, well-written character. I love him so much. And in fact, you know, he's one of these, like, there's a comment that he makes later on where he's like, hey, look, you know, I grow on you. That's how it is. I grow on you. And you most certainly do, Negan. You grow on me. But from here, we basically pick up with him, you know, enjoying his dinner, you know, hanging out with a few of the Whisperers here and there. But the problem is that as he's setting up camp, getting ready to lay down, there's a woman that's getting ready to be assaulted. Now, keep in mind, this is something that Kirkman was really, you know, he didn't go too in-depth into it. You know, he was really kind of holding it out for this. But this is when we learned that when it came to the Whisperers, this was a darker aspect of their society, that a lot of times women were subjected to sexual assault. Now, it wasn't for the purpose of just keeping the men happy. Instead, Alpha has a motivation for this. What happens is that when Negan steps in and immediately attacks these guys, because remember, Negan is adamantly categorically against any kind of sexual assault. That's the one thing that he does not tolerate. He's basically overtaken by Beta, and he's basically knocked out, and he's more or less drug away and forced to sleep away from the camp. But in the midst of this, or in the midst of him, taking up rest, he's approached by Alpha, and he's like, what is your problem? Why would you do this? And she says, because, that's how we do things. Only the strong are able to survive. If that woman is strong, she'll fight off her captors, and if not, she'll be used. Now that is wild. And the cool thing about this is that Negan is a reflection of us, because I doubt there are very many of us who would say, yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. Negan's like, that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard. He's like, you're not civilized in any form or fashion. Not by any form or fashion. Sure, you know how to hunt, you've got an organized society, but you're not civilized. You're crazy people, you're animals. And she says, yes, we are animals. That's how we function. That's what we do. And he says, no, when she goes to walk away, he says, no, get back here. You get back here because you are going to talk to me. And that's the cool thing is he says, look, this way that you guys live, this is not how you do things. This is not how you function. This is not how a society is supposed to work by any stretch of the imagination. This is beyond any real measure of understanding. And she says, look, this is how we do things. I believe this is how we're supposed to function. I gave my daughter to these people under the idea that it would make her stronger, but it didn't. And Negan says, no, that's not why you do this. You do this because you're afraid that if you do not show how strong you are, someone will kill you and take your place. That guy Beta, a perfect example. But this is when Negan also starts to home in on the idea that no, Beta's a bodyguard. Beta is a guy that loves Alpha. He'll do anything to keep her safe. But if Beta was killed, she'd be surrounded by guys who would do whatever it is that they want to do with her. Guys that would take her place, basically result in infighting, And so he basically sits down with her and he says, look, I'm a broken guy. I'm a broken man. My wife died before all this started, because remember, we covered the origin of Negan, or at least the first half. The next half isn't due out until August. But my wife died before this whole thing happened. I'm a broken man. I don't feel anything. I don't love anyone. I don't hate anyone. I feel no emotion. No matter how much I tried, I feel no pleasure. I feel no pain, no nothing. I do things because it keeps things in order. He says, look, when I was running the Saviors, I put an iron to people's faces, not because I took pleasure in it, but because of the fact that it was necessary for me to do in order to ensure that the rule of law was maintained. If people broke the rules, I would kill them. Why? Because it was necessary in order to make sure that the rules were maintained. He says, I would do that few and far between, but it would happen. I've done some terrible things, but I did them because it was necessary to make sure that civilization, that we remained civilized people. There had to be punishments for crime. But he says, you're not an unemotional person. You're a very emotional person. You should be leading by example. You shouldn't be leading by a show of strength. That'll just lead to destruction, because what you're basically saying is the only person who should be able to lead is the strongest. Well, it's only a matter of time before somebody builds up the gumption to kill Beta, then kill her, and then take her place. And so he says you have to inspire people as a leader. People will only follow you, or you can only really maintain leadership when people believe in your cause, when they believe in your idea. This is why Negan is such a great guy, because Negan is so charismatic, such a great character. And so Beta says, maybe you do belong here. Maybe you do belong among our ranks. And it's like Kirkman's kind of toying with this notion of like a possible romance between the two. The problem is that it doesn't happen because Negan slices that girl's throat, son. Oh my God, didn't I build that up well? Didn't I build that up? He cuts her throat, man. Slices that shit right open, slices her throat open, and then cuts her head off. He decapitates her. And it ends when he says, wait until Rick gets a look at you. With that being said, guys, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Them cliffhangers, though. This is actually how the volume ends. I'm not leaving out a cliff. Well, I'm kind of leaving out a cliffhanger, but this is how the volume ends. The next one picks up with the Whisper War, the actual start of the Whisper War. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you all later. Peace.